Hello all, welcome back to our course on digital accessibility, and today we will discuss about reasonable accommodations and a concept called CDE. So, let us just dive into it. So, I think we have already discussed or seen this image earlier in the course, and we would just like to revisit this image just to understand what is the meaning of the word accommodation in terms of accessibility. So just imagine a scenario where there are three diverse kind of people here, in this case having varied heights, and they want to access a match, a football match. They want to see it all, and all three of them are given assistive technology to help them, which is exactly the same for all three of them. It is definitely exclusion, because the youngest one or the shortest one, despite having that solution readily available to him or her, is still not able to access. So, it is still inequality. Then if there is some reasonable accommodation, which means that we are providing a special kind of an intervention for a special use case, it is called accommodation or a reasonable accommodation, which enables most of the people to access the match, right. So, all of them are able to now see, and depending on their needs, we are giving them different kind of products. This is called accommodation. And of course, a radically different idea would include all of them and would mean equality. But in today's session, we would like to discuss reasonable accommodation options, and despite the fact that these are specially made products or special interventions done for special users, and the fact that because these are special, this is not a blanket solution, it actually is an equal solution, right. It is not the same, right. It does not make them feel the same, but many a times access is the priority, and people with special abilities are okay to use such reasonable accommodation, so that at least they are able to access. In some of the use cases, in some of the scenarios, you may need to use reasonable accommodation or cater or enlist or use technologies which actually fall under the concept of reasonable accommodation, and they are not really universal solutions or inclusive solutions like this one, but they definitely help in access and enables access for people who have special needs. So, today we will discuss particularly about accommodations. So, accommodation as per a definition are modifications or adjustments made for an individual. This is the most important aspect of the definition of accommodation. It is not an inclusive solution, it is not a universal solution. It is an adjustment made for an individual's need and on an as needed basis, and it just allows them to get access to the information, to the building, to the whatever it is that they are seeking access to in that moment, right. So, maybe when they come back to get access for the same thing, they will have to re-ask about it, and many a times, for example, in particularly if we talk about access to educational material in inclusive universities and all of those things, they may require extra some specific braille handouts or all of those things, and it is a reasonable accommodation which they have to ask for some of the times, right. And it may require extra work, that is also true. So, in order to accommodate or provide the user with such material, with such accommodating technologies, the institution or the company or the owner of the application or the website, they have to ensure that okay, so and so person is able to access using such a plugin or using such a technology, right? So this requires extra work for some number of people, and thus because it requires extra work for some specific users, it may not be a very economically viable solution sometimes, but we have also seen that in many cases it is also the case that the company or the intention of the project itself or the building itself or the event itself is to make sure that the person is able to attend, the person is able to access the information no matter what. So they are okay with that extra work or that extra added costs, right? And that also, that kind of gesture is also required sometimes, particularly knowing the fact that persons with particularly disability are lagging behind in a lot of scenarios and use cases. So this can be a reasonable example of reasonable accommodation. So for example, if your building, your architect has not incorporated a ramp in the architecture itself, then this is something which is like a removable ramp which the building has decided to add on. It can be removed and added on an as needed basis. Of course, it incurred some additional cost. Of course, it incurs extra work every time it is needed, every time it is added, every time it is removed. But it does allow people with wheelchair to access the building with much ease. So let us take an example and try to understand it much further. So which of the following is an example of inclusive design that might eliminate or reduce the need for accommodations for students with a disability, and which ones are accommodation? So selecting field work sites that are wheelchair accessible. So we are talking about a course planning, for example, from a faculty's perspective. So for example, imagine that you are supposed to teach a course and you have planned a field trip, you have some handouts, you have some educational resources and materials, slides, etc., part of the course. How do you make it accessible to different kind of students, right? So for example, if you are selecting field work areas which are wheelchair accessible, providing a note taker. So a note taker is again an interactive multimodal technology which helps a person with visual impairment to take notes as well as access braille version of accessible documents. Making your class notes and outline available electronically. So whether you want to share your reading material and class notes and outline electronically available, how do you do that, or whether you are doing it or not, whether that counts as an inclusive design or an accommodation is something which we are trying to look at. A flexible attendance policy, would that be a reasonable accommodation or inclusive design example? Requesting open captioned videos. So whether something like this is an accommodation or an inclusive design, that is the question. So the first one, for example, yes, selecting the fieldwork sites that are wheelchair accessible can eliminate the need for alternative assignments or last minute modifications for some students with mobility impairments. So yes, this is an inclusive design example, and it will reduce the need for accommodation or last minute accommodations. Providing a note taker is actually something you can do on an individual basis, on an as needed basis. So, it is actually an accommodation itself, and it is not an inclusive design or a universal solution. Making your class notes and outlines available electronically is actually an inclusive concept, and it will provide greater access to your course materials, make it easier for everyone to access and not just who are blind. It will make the documents accessible using a screen reader for the students with blindness, or other adaptive technologies which read text to speech output software. A flexible attendance policy also may not be an example of inclusive design, and this might be an appropriate accommodation for a student with a health impairment. However, an attendance policy that is too flexible for too many people may become misused or problematic. So, at least as a faculty, I don't believe in this. Requesting open captioned videos, yes, open captioning is essentially the same as subtitling. It requires no special equipment. Many students can benefit from open captioning, including students with hearing impairments, learning disabilities, and those for whom English is not their first language. So, it is an inclusive design solution and not an accommodation. So, accommodations, how they can help more further is like they create an inclusive environment for all. So what we are trying to say is, though having inclusive solutions for all is the best use case, sometimes eliminating barriers for an individual upon request is also needed. So, then that is called an accommodation, but it is also needed sometimes. So, yes, it is something that we as designers and developers who are working towards accessibility should understand about. Understanding accommodations can help us include accessibility from the beginning of the design process, and insights into need for accommodation help in creation of assistive technologies as well. So, let us talk about some more examples of accommodations in digital accessibility. So, for vision impairment, requesting that a website is compatible with screen readers like JAWS or NVDA, or asking for high contrast modes. For hearing impairment, asking for captioning, transcript for videos or audio content is also an accommodation if it is already not embedded in the website, right. So, ideally it should be embedded in the website as per the WCAG guidelines, which we had a discussion about in the previous session. But if they are not there, and if the person is asking and yet you provide it, then it is an accommodation. For cognitive or neurological disabilities, requesting simplified layouts or adjustable font sizes, or the ability to turn off animations, because it can be jarring for the persons with neurological disabilities. For mobility impairment, requesting large touch targets on mobile apps, fillable PDFs for easier use. So, it is something again which can add value and allow them to access or fill the PDFs with much ease. For learning and attention, requesting a plain text version of an email newsletter to avoid complex formatting, right. So, let us try to understand again believe what is the difference between accessibility and accommodation. So, accessibility is the proactive process of designing and developing digital content and products, so they are usable by as many people as possible without the need for special assistance. Right? This is the foundational goal and is achieved by following standards like WCAG that we have already discussed in one of the sessions. Accommodation is a reactive step-by-step process. It's not a proactive. So, once the user asks about that, okay, I need some assistance to access this material, to access this website, this particular table, this particular form I am not able to access or I am not able to understand, then you do a step-by-step process of making specific changes or adjustments to meet the needs of that individual or provide them with extra plugins or extra handouts or some other thing when the baseline accessibility is not sufficient. Right? It is often provided after a user encounters a barrier and requests for help. So, I think this is very important. This is very important that accommodations are provided when requested for, right? Then it is called an accommodation. Accessibility is something we have to proactively make sure that it is there, and if our systems are accessible, probably there is no need to accommodate any special, and that is what it is there in the accessibility definition, that there is no need for any special assistance if the system is accessible. So, I think I hope this concept of accommodation is quite clear. The processes, the techniques would be similar to how you would make the system accessible in the first place. So, again, in order to even provide accommodations, you can go back to your WCAG guidelines and check how to provide, what are the techniques to make a PDF accessible with bigger fields, all of those things. So, the techniques, the code scripts all are already there in the list of techniques, list of failures, all of those things. And when people come up and ask for accommodation, I think that is also for a lot of people the first step into making their systems accessibility, or even realizing that yes, there are people who want to access the system, but they are unable to because of access issues. So, possibly you might have also encountered in your with your products, with your systems, that is the case. But if you have entered the domain of accessibility, please ensure that any new product that you design is following and are in compliance with all WCAG standards, so that there is no need for accommodation in the future. Hopefully, we are aiming for that future. So, let us now move on to another very interesting concept, which is called countering design exclusions. So, let us move to the next concept in this session, which is called CDE, or countering design exclusion, and it is kind of a process framework, and it can help us in identifying exclusionary patterns and reacting to them, so that our designs are more inclusive in nature. So, while it is useful to know who and how many people can use the product, that information does not provide you with enough guidance on how to include more people, right. So, it is like okay, I know my system is able to be accessed by persons who are blind, for example, and so, but possibly you do not know whether your system, how you can actually include people with further barriers or further disabilities, right. So, rather conversely, it is sometimes very interesting to ask that for how many people it is not inclusive. So, who are those people and how many people cannot use my product? asking that question, and why they cannot do so, right? Trying to understand the reason for exclusion as well. So, this highlights the aspects of the products that need to be improved. So, this kind of an approach, while inclusive design approach, can help you if you are, starting a new project, if you want to work on, it's some new problem. But for example, you have already built something, you are aware of so and so aspects of accessibility, but still you are not sure whether your system is completely accessible to a diverse set of audience, then judging, trying to understand who cannot use your product in the best or intended way possible can help you expand the user base to begin with and make the system more accessible and more available for a wider set of audiences. So, this perspective is referred to as a CDE process. So, it is like countering design exclusions. So, what does it say? It says that identifying the capability demands placed upon the user by the feature of the product. So, what we are trying to assess is, like, I think in one of the previous sessions around week 1 or 2, we have discussed something called an ability bias, right. So, it is seen that when designers or teams of developers and designers, they are coming out there designing some product, they tend to place some benchmark ability lists of their intended audience, that okay, my user so and so persona and is able to do XYZ, is able to do XYZ. So, we are always talking about what they are able to do, and accordingly we design. That is called an ableist way of thinking, and it is called an ability bias, right. So, similarly, if we try to consciously analyze our system and assess that okay, what are the capability demands that a system requests or require to be even used in the first place, then in that case, in that analysis, we will be able to kind of judge that okay, if that capability is not functioning, then those people will get excluded automatically. So, just for an instance, so if there is an application which requires X task to be done, which requires a certain visual feedback, which requires a certain dexterity to maneuver and click some buttons in order to get converted, there has to be some language, the information is communicated with you are expecting that the person, the user is capable of understanding that particular language and deciphering the information mentioned on the screen, right. So, it is basically what I want my user to know the language, I want my user to have dexterity, I want my user to have vision, I want my user to have hearing skills, and of course, I want my user to be cognitively sound, right, in order to perceive all of this information, understand its semantic value and then press some button. So, even if it is like a basic interface which has a red button, it says press the button, right. That is it. It is as simple, but it is still, what it is demanding is that you are able to see where the button is, you are able to navigate your finger to it, you are able to lift your thumb and again kind of press it. you are able to read the words press, the and button, you are able to understand what is the meaning of the word press, what is the meaning of the word the, what is the meaning of the word button, then semantically associating it in your mind and then reacting, able to react to the instruction and press the button. So, all of these are capability demands placed by this interface. And similarly, the moment we do it for our interface, we suddenly are face to face with all the capability demands that we are placing on our user. And then you can try to analyze and understand, okay, if so much is required just to press a button, what about my website which has so much information, so many buttons, so many tabs, there's a lot of things going on. So then what all it is required, and then you basically establish that the users who cannot use the product irrespective of the cause of their functional impairment. Right. So, why we are saying this is, I think again, if we go back to our one of the other frameworks where we spoke about disability spectrum, right. So, it may be a situational cause, it may be a permanent cause, or it may be a temporary cause, but they, in that moment, they are not able to interact with your system. So, for example, if this interface is not a digital interface, if it is placed in a factory and it is pitch dark, I will not be able to locate this button and will not be able to press it. If there is no visual, this thing. So, then irrespective of the cause of their impairment, that is why we are putting it here. So, then after this you kind of list out who are the users who cannot use it despite with respect to the cause of the functional impairment, and then redesign the product to lessen the demand. Right. So, then what you do is then you redesign it to lessen the demand. So, if I am assuming that visually the person is able to locate the button, if I can extrude it in some way, so that there is also tactual feedback, then I am opening it to tactile also. If there is some audio cue, if there is some LED lighting around it, so even if it is pitch dark, my user can locate the button and press it. So, similarly, then if the language can keep changing, if we can include more languages, all of those aspects we can try to do, so that this list of demands is less as possible. So, a wider range of users can potentially be included and no one is excluded unnecessarily. So, we have to try to see that unnecessarily some user is not getting excluded. That is the most important aspect. So, let us take an example of this kind of a TV remote. I am sure all of you have it at home, right. So, in this case, what are the demands that this remote places on its users, right. So, one is of course deciphering the meaning of all of these buttons, right, which one is for what and all of that, and then to be able to navigate the keypad, to navigate. So, all of these are like number buttons, then there is this power button, then there are like whole set of buttons which don't know what to do about. So, then basically, and then there is a set of buttons which are most frequently used, which are probably here, right. These are the 4-5 buttons which are most commonly used. Then there are these unnecessary buttons. So, somebody redesigned it, that, so you see, okay, let us see, maybe this is the most important part. So, let us add it. Other than that, sound I want, okay, that can be a separate, not just like here, merged here, so I am not able to identify where the sound is, because volume is important, I keep changing it. So basically the team prioritize what are the features which are most commonly used, and then the settings, etc., all of this is hidden in one button. So because we don't hardly use all of these features ever, right, but there is an option to access them if needed, but to reduce the clutter of, identifying the ones which I want to keep using again and again, I think so decluttering the entire the navigation, this design came into picture. I am sure this also everyone has seen. Similarly, we can take example of a very popular website called IRCTC. I am sure all of you have also seen this website. I am sorry I don't have a very high resolution version of it, because this is an older version, and there are not many pictures of this older version on the internet anymore. And but I remember booking tickets on this interface, and this is just like a very weird, very cluttered interface, and kind of demands it puts on the user, the cognitive demands and the dexterity demands. So I'll just talk about dexterity, for example. So this is the train numbers, these are all different trains from point A to point B, probably they are sorted as per their departure times, etc., that's fine, but they're like very closely put in an Excel sheet kind of a format. But the most difficult thing would always be like this. So here only they have AC1, 2 sleeper, 3 AC, 2, it's written like this, 2A, 1A, and the text itself is the link, right, and you have to press it in this small, like, you have to move the cursor. So these are 4 different buttons basically. Here it is 2 different buttons. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So basically you have to locate and press one of these buttons, and which are very closely kind of placed next to each other, very close, very small size. So it requires a very high dexterity with the mouse in order to press this button. Forget about doing it on a tablet where it's a touch screen, right? And then there is a lot of cognitive load with a lot of information, there's a lot of add, all of these things used to be there, but then they redesigned it into a much cleaner system. And now all of these AC3 and AC3, it's like a drop down, you select, and the selection is usually based on your default, which you always kind of book. So if you always book a sleeper ticket, it will mostly show you sleeper, or AC3, if that is your common choice, it will mostly show you that. Then it asks you to press this button to check availability and fetches real time data, and then it kind of expands and shows you here, otherwise it's not even shown. So I think it is a much cleaner, all of these filters are very nicely placed, the origin and the destination is nicely placed, the journey date, number of passengers, all of those things are there. And it also have these emoticons. So emoticons are a great way to bypass the language barrier, right? So everyone can understand the meaning of a moon emoticon versus a sun emoticon, that it means day and night or something like that, or the timing is here or the duration is here in the clock, right? So I think this is a much cleaner interface, and I'm sure you would agree, and a lot of demands have been reduced in this interface. So, in summary, today we had a discussion about reasonable accommodation, some examples around it, difference between accessibility and reasonable accommodation. Then we moved on to a design process called countering design exclusions, and we had a discussion around that with some tangible interfaces as well as digital interfaces. And as we'll keep using these methods to make systems accessible, possibly we'll learn more about it, we'll be able to relate more to it. So, thank you for joining us in this session today, and we'll hope to see you again in the next session.